bright future. Every student matters.
Now, let's look at the first question. State the main difference between asexual and sexual reproduction. So, the main difference between the two is asexual, there is only one parent. That means there is no seed formation. Whereas in sexual reproduction, we have the involvement of two parents, that is the male and female gamete formation is involved, right? So we need a male gamete and a female gamete, whereas in this no gamete is required, one parent or no gamete, right? So there is no need of any gamete. This is the main difference between the asexual and the sexual reproduction. Pollination refers to the transfer of pollen from anther to ovary, the transfer of male gametes from anther to stigma, the transfer of pollen from anther to stigma, the transfer of pollen from anther to ovule. So the answer to this question is transfer of pollen from anther to stigma. Be very careful, students. Do not get confused with the pollen and male gametes. Pollen grains contain male gametes. So always remember that within the pollen you have the male gametes, and when the pollen grain reaches the stigma, it starts to germinate and then it releases the male gamete inside the ovule. Right? So do not get confused. I'm pretty sure all of you must be careful. I'm pretty sure all of you must have understood the difference between the pollen and the male gamete. Explain the difference between self-pollination and cross-pollination. So self-pollination occurs within the same flower or within the flowers of the same plant, whereas cross-pollination occurs between two flowers of two different plants. So it is very important to understand that within the same plant also, if there are two flowers which are being in between which the transfer of pollen is taking place, that is also called as self-pollination. Cross-pollination, on the other hand, involves two plants, right? So you have two flowers with two different plants, right? The process of fusion of male and female gamete is called fertilization, right? So when the male and female gamete fuse together, they form a single cell called as the zygote, and this whole process is called as fertilization. The ovaries of different flowers may contain only one ovule, many ovules, one to many ovules, only two ovules. So the ovaries of flowers may contain one to many ovules, right? So there can be a single ovule, there can be many ovules within the same ovary, right? So in this way, students, we talked about the sexual reproduction and the different processes that are involved in the sexual reproduction. I hope you were able to understand this clearly. Mature ovary forms. So we saw that mature ovary was forming the fruit. Fruit is also called as the ripened ovary. The example are many, that is your mango, guava, apple. All of these are the example of the mature ovary which contains seed. Seeds of drumsticks and maple are carried to long distances by wind because they possess winged seed, large and hairy seeds, long and ridged seeds, or spiny seeds. So the answer to this question is winged seed. We saw that maple as well as the seeds of drumsticks were winged, right? So they had a wing-like structure which assisted them in flying off to long distances. Name the various ways in which the seeds are dispersed. So seed dispersal takes place by wind, it takes place by water, by animals, and by explosion, right? So these are the various ways in which the seed dispersal takes place, and when you look at a particular seed, you will be able to understand that how the dispersion is actually taking place for that particular seed, right? One morning, as Paheli strolled in her garden, she noticed many small plants which were not there a week ago. She wondered where they had come from, as nobody had planted them there. Explain the reason for the growth of these plants. So the reason for the growth of these plants is seed dispersal, right? Wherever the seed will find a suitable environment, these seeds will germinate there and they will give rise to new plants. We had seen that pollen grains also were performing similar kind of action when they landed on the stigma and they got some moisture, they started to germinate. Similarly, seeds also, when they land on a favorable environment, that is the soil which has fertility or the environment has moisture in it, they start developing into the new plants. And that is the reason why you might notice that if you keep a land barren for some time, within few days, within few weeks, you will find that there is a growth of plant that is taking place in that land, right? So the reason is seed dispersal. Coconut is large and heavy fruit. How is it adapted for dispersal by water? So coconut is able to float on water because of the spongy and fibrous growth, because of the spongy and fibrous covering over this particular fruit, which allows it to float on the water surface. So in this way, students, we talked about the reproduction in plants. We saw both the type of reproduction, that is asexual as well as sexual, and we saw the importance of both and in which plant will we find asexual and in which plant we will find sexual reproduction. I hope you were able to understand the difference between the two and you enjoyed the chapter with me.